Welcome back to the Rogue Wave podcast. Happy to be joined by Jiba Anderson. How you doing, sir?
Good. I'm good. How you guys doing?
Doing fantastic. Now, Jiba is one of the stable of Rogue creators doing stuff with Rogue Matter. We've got a Kickstarter out right now for his latest, which is an illustrated novel called The Court, The Ballad of Finch. A basketball player finds mysterious strangers to help overcome his injuries and soon learns to escape the court. He must pay the price. So Kickstarter is going on right now. You can look it up on Kickstarter.com. You can go to, we'll put the link up on the screen there so you guys can check it out. Jiba, talk to us about The Court. I'm a big basketball fan, so this was really a pleasure to take a look at in terms of projects being announced. Talk to us. What was the inspiration behind The Court, and give our audience a little taste of what what they can expect from it.
Well, you know what? Actually, the inspiration for The Court was me doing something completely different from what I usually do. Usually, as a comic book creator, I'm dealing more in the realm of Afrofuturism. I'm dealing in science fiction.
Yeah.
I'm dealing in like real cosmic, meets political kind of fantasy worlds. And so I wanted to do something that was a lot closer to home, a lot more mundane, not in the sense that basketball is a mundane subject, but, in terms of like some real world type of stories. And I wanted to do something concerning the Black family, just in terms of like, not this whole notion of like, we don't have enough stories of the Black family, blah, 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 blah. You know what I mean? But more so, it is radical to tell a story about Black folk and not have it be about the struggle. And so that's what I wanted to do, with The Courts. I mean, of course, everybody loves basketball. Everybody loves a good basketball story. But for me, the story was more about the relationship between the father and the son.
Yeah. Especially
what happens when a son kind of grows up, idolizing his father. His father is his superhero.
Yeah.
And, what happens when, you see the superhero's kryptonite. You see the superhero being weak, right? Yeah. And how, as a child, that affects you, right? Especially if, you're following in your parents' footsteps, so on and so forth. And so when I was writing the story and thinking about the story, I was actually thinking about the relationship with my father, because, my father is my superhero.
Yeah.
Right. And in some respects, I'm following in his footsteps in the creative realm. He's an architect. I'm a, graphic novelist, illustrator, designer.
Sure.
Right? You know what I mean? So it's funny in some ways. And my pops told me this. It's like in some ways I'm living aspects of his dream, even though his dream was to be an architect. He did mention like years ago that as an architect, he had dreams of like writing action adventure novels and things of that nature that just didn't, come to fore. And he wasn't, bitter about it like Chauncey was, but, it's a situation like, what would have happened if I did that? And for me, it's like, yeah, Dad, I'm living kind of that aspect of your fantasy. And with my father and I, he loves that. You know what I mean? He loves the fact that I'm doing comics. I mean, he got me into comics and things of that nature. So he loves the fact that his son is out there doing his thing, making his mark. By the way, he was super excited for The Court to come out. It's like, what I was talking about, the Kickstarter and stuff like that. He's like, I don't have time to wait for no Kickstarter. I want my book now. I want to read this now. So, you know what I mean? So my relationship my relationship with my father is different from Jarius and Chauncey, but that same sort of adoration, that same love, also that same idea of, going from being a boy to becoming a man, right?
Mm-hmm.
And beginning to step out of your parents' shadow, right? To define your own self. But at the same time, because, the child and parent have the same love for the same thing. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
There's that little bit of tension there. And so that's what I wanted to explore in this story about the Black family, in particular, this story about Black men.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? And how we relate to each other, and how fathers and sons relate to each other. So with the court, it's, yes, it's about a Black family, but the story is a universal one.
No, I love it. There's so much to jump off of from what you just said. The first, we'll do it in chronological order. Being able to go out and do the kind of work you want to do. Like you said, your father had kind of wished he had gotten these stories out, and we hear so many. Hassan and I are both creators as well too. Hassan's an amazing artist. I dabble in art, but he's also a great writer. I dabble in art, and I'm also a writer myself. We hear at conventions, we hear from fans. So many people always say, like, "Oh, well, yeah, I would love to publish my own comic, or I'd love to write my own book." And what was the deciding moment where you were saying, no, I'm gonna stop using the word "I would love to" and actually do it and actually pursue this as career?
The deciding moment was actually in '97 at the Motor City Comic Con.
I love Motor City.
Yeah, I'm a Detroiter, born and bred.
Okay.
So I'm actually from Detroit, now live in Chicago. But anyway, during that convention, I had just got done doing an independent book with somebody else, with someone who's a really, really good friend of mine now, Lamorris Richmond. But anyway, I got done doing his book, and I was shopping it around, and I was showing pages and things of that nature, and I said to myself, yeah, I'm ready for the big time, right? And I actually ran into Steve Rude. And Steve Rude, of Nexus, and Steve Rude is one of my artistic heroes. And so I showed him my portfolio at the time, and he looked at it, and he said to me, he's like, you know what? In 5 years, you'll probably be one of the guys that I'm looking at, right? And at that moment, getting a cosign from Rude and stuff like that. And this was what, 96, I think, something like that. So, the big swell of indie comics, rising. Of course, you had, the Black comics movement rising. Back then, it was the Black Age. You had Tribe out there. You had Brother Man.
Yep.
Of course, Milestone Media. You know what I mean? Which I call my holy trinity. In terms of Black comics. So it was a situation of, I'm there with a couple friends of mine, and I'm like, you know what? Screw waiting to be discovered by DC or Marvel. I'm going to go ahead and discover myself. And the underlying thought from then to starting my company, Griot Enterprises, to launching my book, The Horseman, was all about the only person that is going to derail me from making my dreams come true is myself. So I have to get out of my own way. I have to get out of my feelings of doubt, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
My questions of adequacy, whatnot, and I just got to do it.
Yeah.
And I also had the mentality of, being not only a comic book fan, but also being an historian, and also being like, because I went to fancy colleges like University of Michigan and School of the Art Institute of Chicago, and I studied art. And I studied comics like I studied art, and creators' careers. And so when I thought about a John Byrne, for example, you know, I'm like, X-Men John Byrne was vastly different from Iron Fist John Byrne.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like Iron Fist John Byrne is kind of whack, you know, and Iron Fist John Byrne had to go through it to become X-Men John Byrne, right?
Right.
Same thing with like George Perez, like White Tiger George Perez. He was young, he was fresh, you know, coming out. By the time we get to one Teen Titans George Perez, and then we get to Crisis on Infinite Earths George Perez, you know, you see that leap, right? And you see that evolution. So for me as a creator, I had to stop worrying about being perfect from the jump and just jump.
Yeah.
And as I kept jumping and kept moving, I knew that I was going to get better. I knew that I was going to evolve as a creator, not only as an artist, but as a writer and as a designer, that sort of thing. So, so that, you know what I mean?
No, it's always great. Yeah. I mean, it's always great when you hear the moment where people decide, because, you know, actually take ownership and say, you know what, and regardless of whether it's working for Marvel or DC or starting your own company or doing your own thing, there is a moment where you sit there and say, I don't want to do what, you know, I don't want the life that everyone else, you know, has. I want to go a different path. So. Right.
And it's definitely a decision.
Yeah.
You know, it's definitely a choice. Being in this game is a choice. You know,
Son, you wanted to chime in with something?
Yeah. I understand what you're saying about wanting to do a story that's a little bit different than the standard narrative of, you know, African American comic books, African American characters, and man, I know it. I understand exactly what you're talking about. But my question is, what exactly? Well, I don't know if I'm not putting you on the spot, but what exactly do you want from the medium of comic books in and of itself? You know, there's infinite possibilities with it, you know, and you're already coming to it with an attitude or a desire to do something or see something completely different than what you've been seeing before, and not to put anything that came before us down, but, you know, obviously you're looking to add something new to the conversation. So what exactly, if anything, you know, do you want out of the medium? Do you want to try to accomplish out of all this?
Okay. That's an interesting question, because what I want out of the medium has changed since I've gotten in. In the beginning, when I started Griot Enterprises, I wanted what I believe every artist wants. They want the accolades. They want to be the hot thing. You know what I mean? They want to be the next top creator, right? You know, like it seems we're all of age. We all remember Wizard Magazine.
Oh yeah, we were there.
We all remember the top 10 artists and the top 10 writers.
So some of us remember Wizard more than others.
We both actually came from Wizard. We worked.
Yeah, we're
Wizard.
both ex-employees of Wizard. Yeah,
y'all know exactly what I'm talking about. So so when I say this, you know what I'm going to say. Like, so at a certain point, when I figured out like the top 10 artists and the top 10 writers didn't change, you know, for a few months, I'm like, yeah, okay, you know what I mean. But initially, what I wanted to do when I started is I wanted to create comics, which I did when I got into the game. And then for a while, I wanted that recognition. I didn't think that I was going to be, you know, I didn't think anybody cared. I didn't think anybody knew who I was until like 2005, and I was at San Diego, and I was actually working on another project with some of the Rogue Matter cats. And I was promoting, you know, I was coming back into the game. This was just the beginning of print on demand, so on and so forth. And I, you know, did some postcards, some like promotional stuff, you know, featuring the Horsemen and whatnot. And then I ran into Dwayne McDuffie, the late, great, the God, Dwayne McDuffie, right?
Yeah.
Milestone Media, Holy Trinity, that sort of thing.
Yeah.
And when I ran into him, you know, I did the fan thing first. I was like, and this is how it went. I was like, Mr. McDuffie, first of all, fan moment, big fan, been a fan since Milestone Media. You killing it on Justice League Unlimited, greatest cartoon ever. All right, fan stuff out the way. I'm also a comic book creator. I have my own company, and I just want you to take a look at the website, see what you think. And I handed him a postcard and it had the Horseman on it. And Dwayne looks at the postcard and he's like, the Horseman? And I'm like, yeah.
Oh, man.
And he's like, Griot Enterprises? He's like, that's you? And I was like, yeah. And he's like, dude, I love that book. Like, I wonder what happened to it. Like, I was a big fan of that book. That book is awesome. And I wonder what happened to it. And that's put me on the second road, you know what I mean, of the dream. Yeah. Because when you have, you know, I mean, Dwayne McDuffie inspired a generation of comic book creators, right?
Yes.
And when you have somebody like that being a fan of your stuff, when you've been a fan of, you know what I mean, of their work,
wow,
you couldn't tell me nothing. And then on top of that weekend when I was promoting the other project I was doing, you know, with the Rogue Matter crew, and dudes were coming up to the booth and they saw the cartoon. They're like, yo, the Horseman, the creator of the Horseman, yo, the dude is right. Yo, come back. This is the Horseman dude, right? So in terms of acknowledgement, you know what I mean? That goal was achieved okay. in 05. But then, you know, I still felt like I was a new cat, you know what I mean? Because it's like, you know, you got all these other cats out there. You got dudes like Sanford Green out there. You got Kari Randolph and Jamal Igle and, you know, and all these other dope ass, you know, black comic book creators. Hate them all. I'm kidding. They're all friends. You know what I mean?
I say it all the time. Don't worry about it.
You're right. They're all friends of mine. So the next stage was sort of, okay, creating community.
Yeah.
Right? Creating a community of black creators and stuff like that and beginning to see cats out. And then John Jennings and Damian Duffy reached out to me to be a part of this mythical tome called Black Comics, where this was the book where John and Damian got a bunch of, you know, cats together and created this art book that featured us. So now I'm a part of a community, right?
Yeah.
Right.
And still there's this whole acknowledgement thing in there, you know, accolades and things of that nature. But being a part of that community, being in that book, and then also being an educator, what happened was that I eventually carved out a niche. And in 2019, when I received the Glyph Award for, you know, a pioneer in Black comics from the East Coast Black Age of Comics Convention.
Yeah.
When I got that award, I was like, what? So what? I'm a legend now? Like, I'm a pioneer now? Like, I'm not even 50 yet. Like, so you give that to, like, you know, you give that to cats like George Harriman, or you give that to somebody like Brian Stelfreeze, or, you know what I mean, or Christopher Priest. But I got that. And so now, for me, what I want out of comics, because comics has given me, you know what I mean, these aspects so far, is now I'm in the mode of legacy building.
Yeah.
And I'm also in the mode of, you know, beginning to take my properties and bringing them into other media. I mean, it's like in the past year, you know, I've done, you know, like free product placement, basically, because like the artwork from the Horsemen and the logos have been in shows like Utopia.
Mhm.
I just did a licensing deal for, for some artwork in an upcoming movie with Marshala Ali.
That's great.
And,
Nice.
and I'm in the process right now of putting together proof of concept for the Horseman animated series, which has been something that people have been approaching me for years, but now it's at the point where stuff is actually happening. So, so in terms of what do I want out of comics, it's more like, what else is comics going to give me? And I'm going to, take it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
That's fair.
No, that
That's
makes
fair.
sense. So one last question that I had for you, especially with the court being an illustrated novel, how do you approach that versus comic books? Because it's a visual, it's visual, but it's because it's an illustrated novel, but it's also it's different. I mean,
It's literary.
Yeah, I mean, people always confuse. Well, if I can write a novel, I can do comics, or if I can write a screenplay, I can do comics. And it's like, no.
No.
It's in and of itself. So how did this vary for you?
Okay, so yeah, because they're all different muscles, right?
Yeah.
So in terms of approaching this illustrated novel, what I referenced or what I was reminded of is like, pulp novels, pulp fiction. You think of Robert E. Howard, Edgar Rice Burroughs, shoot, I'll even throw Michael Moorcock in there later on and stuff like that. But when you read like a Conan novel or Elric of Melniboné or Tarzan or John Carter and things of that nature, you have this colorful prose which sort of forms the image in your head.
Yeah.
Right.
Then you take the illustration and you capture a moment, right? As opposed to comics, where comics are a series of snapshot moments coming together to create a visual narrative.
Right.
With an illustrated novel, you have there's even more of that separation of image and text. You know what I mean? Whereas with comics, there's a synergy behind that. With the illustrated novel, there's that separation. So, the separation is all about, okay, I'm describing all of this in text.
Yeah.
What's the moment that I can take to illustrate, to punctuate, right? What is going on in the text before? Like, so the illustration is basically, it drives home. You know what I mean?
Yep.
What the text does, and purposely with the court, especially the way that I illustrated it, is that, I wanted to make sure that even though we have those moments punctuated visually, that unlike comics where a character is illustrated and you know who that character is, so on and so forth, with the court, it's a little bit more amorphous, right? We don't necessarily see the faces of the characters. So it allows the reader to still step in Jarius's shoes or Chauncey's shoes or Space's shoes, so to speak.
Last question. There's a comic book Hall of Fame. You're in it. What is your what's the hat you're wearing, so to speak, using the baseball analogy? Like, what is it that people will know? Like, they'll go up to you and say, "Oh yeah, it's Jiba. He's the guy from."
Oh, what are they gonna know me for?
Yeah.
They're probably gonna know me for two things. Number one, they're gonna know me for the Horseman.
Yeah.
Flat out, Number two, they're going to know me for my anthology series, 4 pages, 16 bars, a visual mixtape, which ironically I'm launching a Kickstarter for next week. But in terms of legacy building, right?
Yeah.
This anthology is all about a collection of where the true diversity of comics lies. So it's creators of color doing their independent work, right? So previous volumes, I've had Sanford Green in it. I've had Kari Randolph in it. This upcoming volume for volume 6, Jamal Igle is in it. At the same time, I've got, illustrators like Sheba Maya and Amber Denise Peoples in there. And then also for this volume, it's like I'm expanding the notion of, it's always been multicultural, but now we have like some Latino creators
Mhm.
up in this mix, like Javier Winnick Cruz, or Javier Cruz Winnick, excuse me, Crystal Gonzalez, Albert Morales, that sort of thing. So that's really fun, and I think those are the things that people are gonna know me for.
Awesome.
Those are good things.
Yeah, I think so.
Those are really good things.
Real quick follow-up. What is it you want them to know you for?
That's a good question.
So that was the setup. The setup is, what do you think they're going to know you for?
Right.
Really?
So here's the artist ego. This is where the artist ego comes into play, right? So I'm on Facebook and stuff like that, and everybody's like, who's your favorite artist? And like so and so, so and so, so and so, and my name doesn't come up. What's interesting is that I think my name doesn't come up because I'm so much more than an artist.
Yeah.
I'm an artist. I'm a writer. I'm a designer. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
I'm an educator, right? And so I feel that people know me best as a creator, because there's some cats that don't know that I draw. They're like, oh, I just thought you were a dope writer. No, I draw that too. You know what I mean? There's some people who like me, some people outside of the comic book realm, right? When we get into the collegiate sphere, you know what I mean, the academics and stuff like that, or even fans and stuff like that, they're like, oh, the art is so dope. Oh my God, this is so great. And I bring all of those aspects together. So at the end of the day, I think that people are going to know me, or I'm going to be remembered as someone, as a creator, kinda, but more so someone who has moved the needle, right? Yeah. And in terms of legacy, hopefully, like, I'm carrying on the tradition of George Harriman, of Matt Baker, of Jackie Orms, you know what I mean? Of the Invisible Men in the book that just came out, right? Of cats like Tertel Lee, of like Todd Johnson and Larry Stroman and the Milestone Fellas, you know what I mean?
Sure.
And the Sims brothers, you know what I'm saying? At the end of the day, I want to be recognized as being a part of that tradition of those cats who moved the needle and pushed the medium forward.
I love it. I love it. You guys can check out The Court right now. It's on Kickstarter. Again, just go to Kickstarter, Google, or type in the search, The Court, The Ballad of Finch. Jiba, it's been a pleasure to have you on, and we wish the Kickstarter the best of luck. There's 1 week to go, and looking forward to more stuff coming from you through Rogue Matter and beyond as well. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Really appreciate it, guys.
When we come back, we will put a bow on tonight's episode.